So yeah, networking is crucial.
Yeah. It's just like a big long echo down the table. It's super important, and I'm only 4 years out of school. I'm from Chicago, and so I maybe know like 3 people from home that live in New York now. My entire network are people that I met at Purchase. The entire network, and it all started there. I mean, not even that many arts management students. There weren't a lot in my program when I graduated, but mostly musicians, dancers, actors. When I had my show, South Bay Cabaret, the first one I did, I recently just programmed like 2 of the same artists at Manhattan Inn, where I'm now the talent buyer, who I presented when I was a junior, which is really great. I mean, there's so many talented artists here, and I'm sure it was, it's been like that forever, but they're just going to keep going. And they're going to, and it's like artists, friends that I had that were, just my buddies, or like the nerdy guy or whatever, they're playing, yeah, there's lots of nerds. There's cool nerds here. Yeah, it's true. But the other day, they're touring the world with bands. They're on TV. They're doing deals with Drake. They're playing, like, headlining Lollapalooza, like 4 years later. And that is my entire network. And from that, it grows and grows and grows, and you have to keep good relationships with those people, not to just benefit yourself, because you're benefiting them as well. And yeah, just know that everyone around you right now, you're going to continue to work with if you choose to continue working in the arts in some way. Yeah.
The Purchase Mafia is very real. I too work with a lot of my Purchase colleagues. I think when I was in college, I thought that the idea of networking was so slimy and so gross, and I was like, that's just not my style. But a lot of us are not really just talking about networking. Everyone's talking about personal relationships, and I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. You don't really need a vast network necessarily. There's a few people that I've worked with time and time again, and those are the relationships and the quality of work that I really liked to do. So foster those relationships that you really want to hold close. I think that just expressing interest in someone else's work and being able to talk about your own work, that's all networking really has to be. It can just start with a conversation. Can you express interest? Can you be interesting? I'd say 80% of my projects involve collaborators whom I already know, or maybe I'm only 1 degree of separation from. And every project that I do, I try to plant the seed for the next project. So for example, this past weekend, I was attending the Minnesota Ballet's 50th anniversary gala performance. They were inviting all of the former dancers back into town, and I'd written a piece for them a few years ago, and another dancer, choreographer said, I saw that piece of yours, I really liked your music. I said, great, why don't you have your organization commission a piece for me? I'd love to write something for you. It started another conversation, and that might play out in the next month, that might play out in the next 6 months or a year, but that seed is planted. And then I'm also not afraid to do cold calls or cold emails. Maybe 20% of my projects come from doing that. And I've even talked to people on the plane and gotten some of my most high-profile, high-paying gigs. They're saying, oh, what do you do if I write music in New York? Oh, no way, I know somebody who knows somebody. So that's the idea of putting yourself out there that also works, too.
Can I just add to it? I just wanted to say something about, respond to your idea of networking being this slimy thing. I mean, you've all known somebody who's like this sort of glad-hander who's really unpleasant. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're talking about really, you have an interest in other artists' work, they have an interest in your work, and we're talking about, I hate to use the trope authentic, but authentic relationships. We're not talking about somebody who kind of tries to weasel into every situation and stuff like that, because that is a real turnoff, and people remember it, and it gets passed around very quickly. So yeah, I mean, and artists are often very uncomfortable with these sort of business language words like network and branding and stuff like that. And I think we can take those words and own them in our own way. You know what I mean? I don't think we have to use the sort of corporate model, but what those mean in terms of developing your practice or your career are really important. But you don't have to sort of follow that corporate model. I mean, I started a space because I was like, you know what, I want to do something where I can have control and I can innovate and I can work with my friends, and I wanted to do that. So I created my own projects. So I think there's lots of ways to, to do that kind of thing.
Everyone likes to be complimented. So like, there's nothing wrong with meeting someone, sending them a message on Facebook and saying, it was really great to meet you. Let me know when your next project's happening. No one's going to be upset with that. And then you go, you've reached out to them and they're like, oh, okay.
And also, people think that, especially young artists and teaching college students, but not even young artists, artists at every age often are really uncomfortable and think that people in the arts are really inaccessible. Yeah. And you'd be amazed at how, really welcoming people can be if you genuinely are interested in something and you have a question and you contact someone. If they don't contact you, fine. They're busy. Everyone in the arts is overworked and underpaid, so, be respectful. But you'd be amazed at how actually really welcoming and open, people who are, the famous artist or the really well-known person in your field, how accessible they actually might be. And, it's sometimes really helpful, or just, making that connection can be really, really wonderful.
Yeah. So we want to have time, so we want to turn it over to the audience. So if you have any questions, or you want to know what advice or tips you want to hear from the panelists, so we'd like to open it up. So, first question.
People,
Not all one stuff. Come on.
Another thing about artists is they do like to give advice too, so that's a good thing, and they like to help, so they're here to help. Otherwise, we'll give you the cheat sheet questions.
So what advice would you give someone that wants to start something now, and so starting a business while you're in college? Is it better to just do it now or wait till after you've done it?
I can start just because I've been self-employed basically my whole life. But, I think it depends on what it is, obviously, and what goals you have for it. Whether, it's sort of how ambitious it is. I think there's nothing wrong with starting it now, as long as it doesn't interfere with your studies. But, no, but I mean, you can start a business in today's world. Things are quite, it's really not that difficult to do something on a small scale. Right? And to start a project on a small scale, so you're not expecting it to immediately be a full-time thing or to kind of support you in a full-time way. So I think it's definitely possible, but it just, it depends on what it is. And I mean, I'm sure anybody would be happy to talk to you about it, in the smaller groups, but you just started a new thing. So
Yeah, I think you should just do it.
Yeah, I kind of think that's
You kind of have to just do it. You know what I mean? I've had a lot of ideas, or with HYPNOCRAFT, I was kind of like futzing around, like self-producing a show here and there for years out of college. And I had this idea rolling around my head for a while that I was just kind of like, was thinking about for a while and never knew if it would be good enough for me to try out. And it's a series that I developed that I presented in April and just finished presenting this week, actually on Monday, called The Hum, and it's an all-women's music series where I curate over 35 artists, and they're collaborating and playing together in a small, intimate room for the first time. And it's a month-long series, and I had been wanting to see women playing music together in a big way for a long time. And it took me a while to just do it, and as soon as I did it, I was like, holy crap, there's just this whole need for this, and people were hungry for it, and now I'm going to bring it into London and LA in the next 2 years. And it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. And so, and that's been the case with other projects I've had too, where, I think a good piece of advice is just do it. In terms of networking too, like echoing what Patricia just said, reach out to people. You never know who's going to get back to you, or who's already heard about you, who already knows what you're doing, is familiar with what you're doing. So be fearless and just do it.
Yeah, I agree. When I wanted to do the residency program, I mean, I had done the gallery thing both as a university gallery director and as an independent gallerist and stuff, and I wanted to do this new thing, this collaborative workspace residency. How would that work? And I don't really, I don't have experience with this, etc. And I was sort of And then I was like, you know what, I'll just do one, and we'll see what happens. And so I put out the call, and I kind of set up the structure, and the first residency we got was a full page in the New York Times. So, you know, I sort of threw it out there and said, well, let's just do it and see what happens. I can learn on the way. Because if you wait for the perfect moment, you know, you'll be dead for it. Because there's no such thing, you know. Perfection is the enemy of the good. I think you just gotta move, you know what I mean? Action begets action, so.
I find a lot of the creative projects that I'm doing, it's like a real professionalization of the art world, and I'm a painter and I'm also a curator as well, and I find that it's, people make assumptions like, oh, you're wearing your curator hat, or you're wearing your artist hat, and because of the involvement of the market, there's definitely a real want to keep these things separate in some sense, but I think that there's a way in which we're moving towards a place where artist is curator or artist does many other things is really a part of your practice. And I'm wondering what you guys feel is it's like a climate shift that's maybe happening, or if there's ways that you, or strategies that you've used that have helped you to kind of compartmentalize, or I don't know, like how do you guys approach being an artist, being an artist, and also having creative projects at the same time?
I don't want to monopolize this conversation, but I mean, I think it's just, you have to just kind of, it's an internal shift. And when you make that internal shift, it you know, it helps the world. But you do have to encounter assumptions. And I think that's, you know, I always quote Ani DeFranco. She says, you may not want to work for the man, but you have to have another plan. So, you know, like there's a system that exists, and I always want to encourage people to both, you know, understand how the system works so that you can function within it, and also create your own systems, new systems, because those influence the way the system works. So I think the balance is for you, because it can be true that you can get known as a curator more than as an artist, and that can affect your, you know, your own studio career. But it's a balance that really is up to you, I think, and how you put it forth in the world.
I would completely agree. You know, it's okay to do 3 things. Try not to do 4 things. Yeah. You know, the other thing, you know, I'm seeing in music is like this show's going up at BAM coming up this November. Shara Warden from My Brightest Diamond, trained as an opera singer, has a band. Now she's worked with Pulitzer Prize-winning composers. So this constant pluralisms, constant dualities and blending that I think is happening more and more and more and more and more. And maybe the next artist is really a curator / artist. And so I would just embrace that.
I wish more dancers did that. I think in that realm, you have a tendency to be focused, and then it hits you that you have to suddenly, oh my gosh, I have to think of something else. And it's not within the culture to have that duality or 3 things going on at once, and it's a really hard transition sometimes.
It's really specific to dance too.
Yeah.
Dancers are really stuck inside their own communities and only watch each other, and it's so interesting to hear about somebody that's like has this dance and musician
and
background.
That's musical theater too, so it's even
Yeah.
different still.
But he left that world.
Yeah.
And came into another. So I'm saying
Yeah.
the idea of staying within your dance community and incorporating other things
It's important.
while you're still performing is a very, very unusual.
Yeah, not a lot of people are thinking.
No, and I think a lot of it has to do with this constant train, you know, you're constantly needing to train. All of your time is spent on like making sure you're not injured. And
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So it's very difficult sometimes. But I wish that were not the case.
Well,
is what I'm
time is
saying.
really an issue, because it's true if you do 2 things, you know, that you only have however many hours there are in a week. You know what I mean? So it does dilute your time. So you have to be, like, that has to be, it's part of my sort of personality, you know what I mean, to want to do those things, but I also accept that it means I'm not spending 40 hours a week doing this one thing. So it does affect those practices. So that's how I kind of shifted my way of looking at it, to think, well, this is also my practice, and this is what I choose to do, because this is what feeds me as a person.
And if any of the table folks want to answer any of these questions too, you're welcome to chime in there as well.
I wanted to tag on to that actually. There's this really good article called Full Service Artists by Rachael for Art America. Months ago, he talks about basically that question of the artist as curator, artist as collector, artist as facilitator of all these different things, and it's really interesting, and he really profiles people like Ron Flood and Martin Kippenberger, a lot of artists in the Soho and Lower East Side scenes that felt the need for the dealer and the curator to exist, but they weren't there for them, so they did it, themselves. It's a really interesting article that kind of gives you, I think, a lot of inspiration as to what is possible over the decades, and also right now, as you're saying, you're shifting, and maybe it's just allowing more opportunity for those last people, rather than like assuming that you should participate in it.
Yeah, a lot of those galleries on the Lower Side and Bushwick and Brooklyn are artist-owned spaces. I mean, that's a huge thing in New York. I just want to say one other thing, though. There is also like the thing to be careful of the management of time, right? Commitment to the particular practices that you have, and also the danger that, and I think this is not just true in the freelance economy, which is not just for artists. There's sometimes an expectation that you do everything and don't get paid for all of it. So I think you have to really be, conscious of how the business practices work, and so that you can protect yourself in that way too.
Oh, yeah.
I think my name is Tiffany Fisher, and one of the table hosts, and I think what you're talking about is really interesting. So for myself, I'm currently running a company, a dance company, Elise Fonte Dance. I have my own nonprofit that works with dance, music, theater, and film, and then I curate separately. And I think something that Ryan said really is true, is that all of those things kind of feed each other, and they're all true to me, and that's why they work. Like, I also like comedy, but that has nothing, that's neither here nor there. You know what I mean? So I think that if you have multiple interests, like for me, it all feeds in. So I'm sitting there either in the studio creating with my dancers, and then I'm like, oh, there's something about like ITE that pops in my head, and I'm like, yes. Like each one kind of feeds the other, and I think it is rare. I think sometimes you do feel like, oh no, I have to be like the curator now. No, I have to be. But if you open it up a little bit, I think with a lot of artists, it's kind of rapid fire like impulse. So if you open it up, you'll see that they're not so different.
I mean, I really agree with you too. I just think that the cultural perception of, person, like now you're a curator, now you're an artist.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that it's more maybe like a climate shift that needs to happen in terms of the way that people think about things, and that like we can, like maybe like the studio practice is like a way of acting in the world. And so it's like, and that includes curating, and it includes being an artist, and it includes looking at things and experiencing a conversation, and that can be your practice, But I think that there's this kind of need to name things that's happening, and it's not allowing for this kind of fluid movement. And I think it's like a real need to name things culturally right now that I'm kind of pushing back against, and I see that happening.
I think it's a business model shift too.
Yeah.
Like, at least in the dance world, before you could do anything, you needed to dance for someone. And then, if they deign to look at you, then it's like, now you can be a choreographer, congratulations. And that's all you could do. So if you were like, well, maybe I want to do multimedia, they're like, well, let's reconnect. But I think that as, like when I was here, I graduated in 2003, there wasn't arts administration. So as the artist becomes the business, you have to curate, you have to dance, you have to create, you have, like, whatever it is that you do, because that is your brand. Like, you are your brand. And so I think what you're feeling is right, is that, it's not even like I graduated 12 years ago. There's been a huge shift in what's allowed and what's been deemed appropriate or acceptable for an artist to be. And this generation has like opened it wide open. You guys have like completely busted it open, which allows people that came before to finally, thank God, it's like it's embraced in a very different way. Where before, we're like, well, how do you do that, and how do you now? It's like, well, good for you. What else do we have in there? So I think what you're feeling is very real, and I think it's on an upward swing. And I think that trajectory is going to continue.
It's already happening.
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to go the other way anytime soon. So I think what you're bucking against, you probably won't have to buck for too much longer.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna, and this might be a stupid question, but I guess when you had said, artist is, curator, and artist has all these other hats, I would assume like time management is a big part of, what you do. I don't really think that that's really elaborated on enough. So
actually ask, when do you sleep?
It's so hard.
You sleep when you're dead. No, I think time management, the first thing I teach in the professional practice class is budgeting and time management. Because if you, usually as an artist, if you have money, you don't have time. If you have time, you don't have money. So it's a constant balancing act. I mean, I think it's crucial to develop good time management skills. Absolutely essential.
It's a life skill.
It is a life skill.
It's not just an artist. It has nothing to, it really, you can apply it in every day you should apply that.
I think I used to sort of like shame myself if I went a day without being able to compose, you know, like you're not, or a week, oh my God, I'm not a composer anymore, I didn't compose all week, no, you know. But so like that idea of time management is kind of opening up for me to say, well, I do need to align my time with my values. So if I value composing, I need to put time toward it, but maybe it's not on a day-to-day basis. Maybe, as Tamar Adler writes in her food book, it's not about balancing the meal, to have your fruit and vegetable, and it's about balancing the day. And maybe it means balancing the week, or maybe it means balancing the semester. And I try to look at, these are the weeks where I can devote to composition. And if I'm not doing composition, then this is the time that I can utilize my energy and work on the promotion side. This is the time where I can go research and see performances. So you can sort of define what that is for you and how you can navigate that in a way that feels comfortable for you.
If you don't schedule your artistic practice, it won't happen.
True.
Everything else will fill the space. And when you're an artist, you know, starting out or whatever, or even not even starting out, this happens in your life, you don't always have a show coming up or, you know, something. Sometimes you're in a time where you're just working on your own. So you really, artists are incredibly disciplined. They have to be incredibly disciplined because, again, if you don't time it, then laundry will take over. You know what I mean? Like anything silly will. So it's incredibly important.
I lead the, I don't know if there are many other arts managers in here, but I lead the first year seminar for arts managers, and I said, well, how much time do you spend doing Facebook a day? Most students said over 2 hours a day. You know, how much time do you do studying a day? Most students did not say over 1 hour per day. How much time do you do to your art? You know, I get that the classroom and the outside of the classroom, all these things are important, but are you aligning your time with your values? And one of my friends, who I was a colleague with, is now a film composer out in California, and he was a good student and worked all the time and produced a lot of work, but he says, when he reflects back on his time on Purchase, that while he was at Purchase, he had time to sleep. Which is just to say that the shit really hit the fan, you know, and he really was sleeping overnight in the studio all the time. So, I mean, it's just going to get harder. Start managing your time now.
Yeah, the first exercise I do in professional practice is I have the students record every single thing they do for an entire month.
Yeah.
Time it. They have to do that also for their money, but for timing, because you suddenly discover that you know, how much time you're actually spending on some of the things, and then also that you might have had spare, you know, it just gives you an assessment of, you know, a realistic assessment of what you're actually spending your time on.
So when you sleep when you're dead is actually true.
I think that depends.
I think also, as a student, I was a big procrastinator, and I work really well under pressure. I can just crank things out. But you can't always do that. You'll kind of go insane, and I've kind of made myself insane by being a procrastinator and waiting to do stuff until I'm really stressed out. So something I like to do is just compartmentalize what I'm doing. If I really need to get stuff done, instead of procrastinating, I just take the time to zone everything out and get shit done. And I do that every single day. You know, instead of putting things off, because the more you put things off, you're actually just like missing so many opportunities, and you know, tired. You're not doing your best work. So I think it's important when you know because you know you procrastinate because it's stressful. You don't want to handle the stress, but I think it's best when you can just zone everything out, and then it's less stressful to handle things. Compartmentalization.
And multitasking is a myth. I'll just tell you right now. I mean, they've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies on this, and you are 25 to 30% less productive when you multitask. And as artists, you need to have, I mean, you know, an artistic practice is a deep practice. It's a deep investigation if you want to really be serious about it, and a deep investigation requires absolute deep focus. And so if you're like, you got Facebook open and you got your earbuds in, you got like 20 things happening, I mean, you're just not as productive. So it can be difficult training, but you have to train yourself to be incredibly focused. I mean, it's easier for dancers because I guess if you're in the studio moving around, right? But if you're an artist painting, it's very easy to get pulled away by all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
So one last question, and then we're going to kind of shift to further working.
Question about, like, let's say like you have an internship, which I'm already in, and you're not guaranteed you're going to get a job, so what is the next step in doing that? Should I look into, or is for anyone looking into another opportunity to find a job after college, or do more networking as well? What should you do?
Well, I don't think an internship means you're definitely going to get a job.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I might question, you know, if you're looking to get a job and you want to intern someplace knowing that you'll get a job, then I think you'd have to seek ahead of time to make sure that that's sort of possible. But I would say it's about the time you spend in your internship, what you're going to learn, and then what you're going to bring and take with you.
Maybe career counselors who can help you out too. Maybe help connect you to some alums and help connect you to other opportunities that are going to give you experience.
Are you an arts management student?
No, I'm visual artist.
Of visual arts.
Well, I always say, I mean, I worked all through my time here at Purchase. I worked almost full-time through a good portion of it because I had to pay for my college. And so I'm like a first-generation college student. And immediately right after school, I mean, I haven't stopped working since, right? But I think you can ask yourself, what kind of job do I want? Do I want a job where I'm doing the things that are related to my practice? So do I want to work in a museum, or do I want to work in a gallery? Do I want to work in an arts context? Or do I want to work in a place where I'm not doing anything artistic at all so that my brain is totally available when I enter the studio? I mean, I think you have to kind of assess what kind of person you are. What kind of, is a 9-to-5, like is the stability of a 9-to-5 job with insurance, et cetera, what's going to make me feel, able to work in the studio freely? Or is that going to constrain my work? I mean, everybody's really different. So I think you can really develop and build a life that is tailored to you. Like for me, the 9-to-5 job is like a fork in the eye, you know what I mean? But for my, dear friend who's a poet, it was like she needed that stability in order to feel free in the studio. So you really have to ask yourself those questions. And for me, having my mind consumed 24/7 with art is just like, that's my nature. But for other people, that really takes away from the studio time. So they want a job that has nothing to do with it. So I think, that's what I'd say about that.
So we're going to shift things a little bit, and you're going to have the opportunity to continue the conversation, network with the panelists, as well as